if you're at a GEM school, it sounds like there could be potential rises coming, but that is not the case in every school. In fact, within hours of that index being released yesterday, the Indian High group of schools confirmed it would be freezing fees at all 3 of its Dubai campuses for a 6th consecutive year. And to find out more, I am actually delighted to be joined in the studio right now by Punit Vasu, who is the Chief Executive of the Indian High Group of Schools. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. Great pleasure to have you with us. Thank
Georgia,
you.
Thank you for having me. Ramadan Kareem once again.
Yeah, Ramadan Kareem, indeed to you. Only a few more days in which we can say that. Tell us, you made this decision super quickly. The statement came out almost as fast as the KHDA's index. How did you make this call?
I think there's a lot of thought that goes before we make such a decision. So while the statement would have come out in line with what the KHD announced, I think there's a very, very strong sense of fiscal discipline that we adopt at our group of schools. And as I mentioned to you and many of our stakeholders before, we remain true to our purpose. What are we as a group of schools? We are a non-for-profit community group of schools. We're established in 1961, so we pretty much precede the formation of the UAE as a federation, right? And true to our core of providing outstanding quality, affordable education accessible to the Indian diaspora, we need to take a strong, hard look at us and say, what does it mean to our stakeholders? So we are very, very firm. Our Board of Governors, our trustees, are extremely firm in the belief that education needs to be an affordable, accessible commodity. So it's probably the 6th year in the running that we have not increased the fees. Georgia, you mentioned that the KHD allows schools to increase fees by up to 5%. As a non-for-profit community group of schools, we are actually eligible for an even greater increase.
That's interesting. How does that work? Because that's something that wasn't sort of outlined in the index for journalists.
Correct. So I think as a non-for-profit group, given that we have a special status, we are eligible to apply for an increase based on rating and our status. So it's a very interesting observation that we are yet choosing not to apply even for the baseline, yet alone be eligible for an even greater increase.
Now, your parents must be absolutely thrilled. And every time I speak to anyone who is involved in a not-for-profit school group, I wish that my children went to a not-for-profit school group. Because, of course, the emphasis is entirely different. You're not trying to make money for shareholders. You're not trying to make money. How, nevertheless, are you covering costs? Because over the last 6 years, they must have gone up.
Absolutely. I think we live in a highly inflationary environment. We know cost of living has gone up. We got to look after our staff. We got fantastic appraisal and compensation programs in place. And I think we focus very strongly on the growth lever. I think Dubai is a great city, right? It's one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And there's no dearth of learners. In fact, we have a very, very strong waiting list. So we are focusing heavily on the growth story of Dubai and focusing on adding capacity, right? So that's one big factor. The other lever, which we are very, very keen to always exercise is the efficiency lever. So we have 13,000 learners, almost 50,000 stakeholders if you include parents, grandparents and extended families. And that's a pretty sizable chunk. So our approach as a group has been to have very, very strong long-term levels of commitment with our vendors. For example, we have signed long-term maintenance contracts with a very, very reputed vendor. So we're kind of pinged and pinned down those costs. We have done something similar for property and all risk insurance. So we are working with internationally accredited and approved vendors and giving them a long-term commitment that we will do business with them. And that is helping us manage costs and almost defy inflation.
I mean, what's amazing is that it's a completely different model to most of the schools here in the UAE. And I mean, Dubai specifically is the emirate that we're talking about now. But you say you have waiting lists, so you could put your fees up. You know, the natural sort of situation is that, you know, when demand is high, then that is when you can make things more expensive. But nevertheless, you're still choosing not to. Instead, it sounds like you're considering increasing capacity.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, we have a very benevolent board of trustees, a group that strongly believes that education as a commodity actually has inelastic demand, doesn't it, right? It's very sticky, right? So if you actually analyze our commitment to our learners, parents really don't have a choice of being able to move if the fees go up. So we have a deep sense of commitment that actually there's no choice. Unlike other goods and services where you can actually move, right? So if your rent goes up, you can look for different accommodation, you know, if there's any other commodity. But education, how often do you hear people saying, well, my fee has gone up, I'm actually going to change my child's school next day and then keep changing it. So we actually believe that we're accountable and responsible to our learners. We're not doing the community a favor. It's actually ingrained in our DNA. We owe that level of commitment, accountability, and service to our learners because we understand that parents really don't have a choice. And if you look at Dubai's vision of D33 and doubling Dubai's population by 2033, then unless players and groups like us show up to the party and show that level of commitment to Dubai, you know, it's not going to be easy. Because unless we cater to that strata of population, we won't be helping Dubai grow. So I think we have a strong sense of commitment to the city, to the emirate, to the country, and we all need to play our role together. And when I spoke about economies of scale earlier, I think our group is more than willing to actually share our learnings. And actually the more the merrier, the more the people and more schools want to join us in creating this massive group which has economies of scale, we'd be happy to extend that to others as well.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. It was a very late request because this report came through quite late in the afternoon, but Punit was ready to come into the studio and do this interview. So thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us once again.
Pleasure. Punit Vasu there, Chief Executive of the Indian High Group of Schools.